Hey legends, welcome to another edition of Buy, Hold, Sell. And this week on the buy list, we've got some fallen guns set to explode. We've got a couple of guys on the hold list who get a stay of execution. And on the sell list, we've got some guys who've fallen to some new and pretty disappointing lows. So with all of that in mind, let's get into it. Okay, so first up, we've got Kai Pearce-Paul. He's playing on the edge at the Newcastle Knights. He's 585k with a 23 break even, a pretty decent 0.67 ppm, and is currently owned by less than 7% of players. Now, he has scored recently a 40, a 61, and a 53. It looks like he's pretty much secured an 80-minute role at the Knights. I think we were a little bit worried about Dylan Lucas, but that doesn't seem to be an issue, at least not at this point in time. And if he can continue to pump out 50-plus scores week in and week out, then I think Kai Pearce-Paul will be a good addition to the edge. I know personally it's been a little bit of a concern for me. I just don't have any solid edges, and I'm hoping that Kai Pearce-Paul can be a little bit of a solution in the long term, and that's probably why he is this week's second most traded in player. Next up, we've got Angus Crichton. Now, he's a little bit of a specky, and he's really on my radar from a next week point of view. I really want to see how he goes in this Roosters side this week. But he's playing on the edge. He's only 437k. He does have quite a high break even at 52 and a 0.76 ppm. Now, he's only owned by less than 2% of fantasy players. And this year, he's only scored a 15 and a 13 in very limited minutes. So why the hell am I recommending Angus Crichton? And for me, the easy answer to that is history. 2023, he averaged 32. 2022, he averaged 53, and in 2021, he averaged 58. So if he can get anywhere near that, if he can get to the 40-plus mark, and I really want to see how he goes this week starting in a Roosters side, then I reckon Angus Crichton becomes a very interesting prospect for the remainder of 2024. Because like I said earlier with Kai Pearce-Paul, we've got some problems in our edge back rowers. And who knows, Angus Crichton could be the solution that we're looking for. All right, let's keep moving. Next up, we've got Kalyn Ponga. Now, available, obviously, wing fullback, 705k, so not cheap, but relatively cheap for a gun, I've got to say. And he currently sits with a 39 break even and a 0.66 ppm, owned by just under 24% of fantasy players. And he's coming off a 72 in round 4. So that was pretty impressive. So the big question here is, has Kalyn Ponga bottomed out? And is this kind of the week to start really considering jumping on board, especially considering his run over the next few weeks? He's up against the Dragons, the Chooks, the Dogs, the Finns, the Warriors, the Tigers, and the Titans. It's probably not the most difficult of draws. And I'm starting to think there could be some serious points on offer for a Kalyn Ponga. Now for my team, I'd love to get him in this week. I just can't do it, but he's definitely on my radar for sure. So he's on our buy list this week. Let's keep moving. Next up, another wing fullback, Clint Gutherson. We saw what he could do on the weekend, pumping out a decent 65 in round 4, which was pretty amazing. So 586k, he's probably one of the cheaper wing fullback options that has the capability of scoring some pretty fantastic points. He does also have the kicking duties, and we know he plays significantly better when there's no Mitch Moses. So he's ticking a lot of boxes right now, only has a 35 break even, a 0.53 ppm, and is owned by just over 1% of fantasy players. So he's an interesting player to keep an eye on. Now, I know a few players jumped on board last week, and kudos to you for that. I had problems elsewhere. Just fielding a team of 17 was a bit of a struggle with so many players out. I reckon he's definitely a consideration for this week and probably next week as well. And I reckon maybe as long as Mitch Moses is out, then Clint Gutherson is definitely an opportunity. So let's keep moving. Now, pretty much what we just said for Clint Gutherson also applies for Dylan Brown. So obviously available in half, he really gets the keys for the team for the next few weeks. 665k with a 51 break even, a 0.63 ppm, owned by less than 5% of fantasy players, and managed to pump out a very decent 61 in round 4. I think those points are going to continue like Gutherson as long as Mitch Moses is out, and they should, because he really has to take control of the Parramatta Eels. And I actually reckon he's just going to get better and better. So if you've got the money to bring him in, I think he's going to go okay. All right, let's keep moving. Now, this is the last guy that we've got on our buy list, and it's probably no surprise, but Blaze Tulagi, he's probably the best cheapie on offer at the moment. Now, I know there's a couple of others that are a little bit specky, but if your team is anything like mine, you've got some problem in the edges and you've got some problems in the centers. And for me, he kind of closes some of those gaps, or at least has the potential to close some of those gaps in the centers. But we do have some question marks on Blaze. So first up, 301k. So he's still pretty cheap, only has a 2 break even and a 0.47 ppm. Owned by just over 17% of players. Now, in his first 2 rounds, he scored a 42 and a 34. Now, I do have some question marks on Blaze. So, first up, if the Eels continue to lose, if they lose again this weekend, will they continue to run with the Blaze experiment in the halves? Does he have decent long-term job security? And will he continue to perform? So they're my question marks for Blaze. Now, what Blaze does for me at 301k is kind of allow me to down trade a player out into Blaze and then upweight a player into my edges. So for me, it's a nice, neat trade. So it could work out well, especially if he continues to pump out scores that are better than those players in my centers at the moment. Let's keep moving. Alrighty, onto the holds, and first up, a guy who is just on fire, Lockie Galvin, available in the halves, currently 405k with a -5 break even and a 0.64 ppm, so owned by just under the 36% of players. And so far he's pumped out a 43, a 60 and 44. He will be out for 2 weeks though. But I'm thinking logically he'll be the first guy straight back in when that suspension is over. And something to start putting your eye forward to is the major buy round in 13, and he won't be available for that. So personally, I still think he's worth it, but definitely something to consider. Now, the reason I've highlighted round 13 there is if you've got a Nathan Cleary, a Nico Hines, and a Lachlan Galvin, then all 3 of those are logically going to be out because, 2 of them are going to miss with State of Origin, and Galvin definitely won't play because he's on the round 13 bye. So all of these things are worthwhile considering. Let's keep moving. Okay, next up, an easy one here, Xavier Willison, middle and edge, 311k with an 8 break even, a 1 point ppm, which is awesome. Currently owned by about 32% of players. In his first 2 games, he got a 35 in 42 minutes and a 32 in 33 minutes. Unfortunately, he copped a bit of a head knock at training and will miss this week, but I reckon he comes straight back into the team next week. And of course, he's going to be the guy who is up when Payne Haas, Paddy Carrigan are out on State of Origin duties in probably, 2 months' time. His long-term security is probably a 50-50 at this point. It really depends on how much faith the Broncos continue to put in players like Corey Jensen and Fletcher Baker. Now, I think that realistically, Xavier Willison is the next man up, and he's really just waiting for that major opportunity to break through as a full-time Bronco in the starting side long term. So keep an eye on Xavier Willison. He's definitely a hold if you already have him, and I reckon we might talk about him again next week. Let's keep moving. Okay, Tommy Turbo, a little bit of a gun who hasn't yet really fired. I don't think we've seen the best of Tommy Turbo, but I do wonder how many weeks in a row can we continue to talk about Tommy Turbo as someone who's so close to firing but just hasn't yet done it. Now he's 660k, has a 53 break even and a 0.63 ppm. He's owned by just under 20% of fantasy players and scored a shockingly low 39 in round 4 with the most ridiculous number of errors that I think I've ever seen in one of the sloppiest Manly Sea Eagles teams that I have ever seen run out on the park. Now, fingers crossed, that is the worst we will see them because this week they are up against a mighty challenge in the Penrith Panthers, followed by the Warriors, the Titans, the Eels, the Raiders, the Finns, the Broncos, and the Storm. So it doesn't really get significantly easier from this point. And that's probably my biggest concern with the Tommy Turbo is coming up against some of those superstar teams. Does he have the ability to score some massive points? Now that remains to be seen. He's in my team and I'm probably going to persist with him and hope that at some point he comes good. Now the big risk with Tommy Turbo is injury, and if he's playing a Penrith or a Warriors, Raiders, Broncos, Storm with some big boppers over the next few weeks, that fragile body of his may be in for a bit of a battering. So that's one of the things that I'm concerned about with Tommy Turbo. But who knows? These could be the games where he stands up and really breaks out. I'll probably reevaluate Tommy Turbo after the Titans game, if he continues to produce sub 40 scores, then I think we're going to have to give him the boot pretty quickly. But at this stage, he's a hold, and we keep moving. All right, Joey Chan, you can see death in the background there. He's so close to being chopped, but I just need a little bit more information. So he's only 295k, only played the 2 games for a 26 and a 35. The big question marks I have for Joey are, will he get another crack, and how bad is that hand? He was nowhere to be seen on the teams list at all this week, whether it's in the reserves or on the bench, so I'm a little bit concerned. Now, personally, in my team, I'm probably going to give him the chop, so I want to be fully transparent there. It'll really come down to Joe Chan or Ben Trebojevic in terms of the players that get chopped, and we'll talk about Burbo in a minute. But I reckon, given he's only 295k, you've only made, I think, about 30k so far. He's probably a hold until we get some more clearer information out of the Storm. And we see how Sean Bloor goes, because if Sean Bloor is a flop, then I can almost guarantee a Joe Chan is likely to come back into that team. But if Sean Bloor takes off and is amazing, then bye-bye Joey Chan. It's going to be very hard to crack back into the Melbourne Storm team. Let's keep moving. Okay, another player who gets a stay of execution is Jamin Salmon. Now, at 361k with a 20 break even, he'll continue to make a little bit of money, not a lot. And personally, when I look at Jamin Salmon, I feel he's been a little bit unlucky. He's the player that seems to get constantly moved to the centres when someone like an Addo Carr goes down with an injury. Now, he's owned by just under 38% of fantasy players, and so far he's managed to score 29, 31, 37 and 21, all of which are above his break even. So I reckon if Salmon can continue to pump out somewhere around the 30 to 40 mark, then he's probably got about another 1 or 2 weeks left in him, and then we'd be looking to move him on anyway as the bye approaches for the Doggies. Now, speaking of the Doggies, next up, Samuel Hughes. Now, he was definitely on the chopping block this week, especially after he got that 8 in round 4. But at 278k and a 26 break even, it's that PPM that really saves him at 0.96. Now, I reckon those 38.51% of fantasy players were really looking for blood this week from Samuel Hughes. So it's only really the fact that Jacob Preston is now out for a few weeks and Sam Hughes comes into the starting side that we're all like, hang on a second, we might need to reconsider a bit of a rage trade on Sam Hughes. Because let's face it, that 25, 29, 17 and 8 in his first 4 rounds has been very disappointing for someone that Phil Gould said was pretty much the next Jacob Preston. So now he gets his opportunity as the next Jacob Preston. So Samuel Hughes, it's time to step up or step out, buddy. And from you, I'm looking for 40 plus minutes against some quality teams. So you've got the Roosters, the Storm, the Knights, and then the bye. So very keen to see your scoring just accelerate over the next 3 rounds, and hopefully you can land somewhere near the 400k mark. And then we'd probably all look to move you on anyway. So let's keep moving. Okay, so we're on to the sells, and first up we've got Zach Hosking. He probably deserved to go last week, but I don't think too many people predicted that he'd get a concussion and only pump out the 22 in round 4. Unfortunately, that means his break-even is starting to skyrocket. It's now up to 61. He's 745k and will probably start to lose money over the next few rounds. He has a very respectable 0.73 ppm, is owned by just under 4% of fantasy players, and is out in round 5 thanks to that concussion. I think the big problem here with the Raiders is they just have so many superstar forwards that they're really going to struggle to fit in and give minutes to. And for me, that's the big watch out with Zach Hosking. So I reckon if you jumped on early, you've made a truckload of cash. Now might be the time to jump out and just see how things go over the next few rounds. Let's keep moving. Okay, so next up, Joey Lussick. I can actually see a bit of an argument to hold Joey Lussick over the next week or two. He's 525k, has a 44 break even and a 0.61 ppm, owned by less than 13% of fantasy players. That 24 in round 4 really hurt us, and I'm hoping that that is as low as he can go. Now, he does have a 44, a 66, and a 28. The thing that really concerns me the most is the reduction in minutes, and obviously the reduction in points along the way as well. Now, this week, round 5, he is in a team with no Brendan Hands on the bench. So if you're looking for a reason to hold on to Joey Lussick, it might be that. Now, there is some longer term benefit with Joey Lussick as well because he will play the round 13 bye. And you'd have to think if 24 is his absolute bottom, then fingers crossed the only way is up from here. The only thing that really concerns us is the fact that history is not really on the side of Joey Lussick when it comes to scoring pretty big points. He'll probably settle somewhere around that 35 to 40 mark. And if you're okay with that for a player that's 525k, then look, hold him. But maybe look to cash out 525k and move on to perhaps someone with a higher upside. Let's keep moving. Alrighty, Ben Trebojevic, Burbo, edge center, 354k with a 26 break even and a 0.52 ppm, currently owned by a massive 64% of fantasy players, and he has the shockingly low last two round scores of 15 and 22, with minutes declining, and he's up against the Penrith, the Warriors, the Titans, the Eels, the Raiders, the Finns, the Broncos, and the Storm, so he's got some pretty decent defensive work on the way. So the big question mark here with Burbo is, does he have what it takes to put in those defensive efforts over the next few rounds? Because he's going to need it, especially up against the Panthers and the Warriors in particular, because I think those attacking stats may be a lot harder to come by over the next couple of rounds, that's for sure. Now for me, it's really going to come down to Burbo or Joey Chan on the chopping block this week. Burbo is worth a little bit more, but he's playing and is likely to make a tiny bit of money this week if he can maintain his average. And of course, Joey Chan is not actually playing at all. So I've got a little bit of thinking to do there, but all I can say is that 15 and that 22 are absolutely disgusting in the centers, and I've really got to clean that up pretty quickly. I'm probably going to be looking at a Blaze Talagi to really sort of close that gap for me this week. Let's keep moving. Okay, Morgan Smithies playing edge mid, 563k with a 44 break even, a 0.61 ppm, and currently owned by just over 6.18% of fantasy players. Now, the thing to note here with Smithies is, has he peaked? He managed to get a 52 in 80 minutes, a 46 in 80 minutes, and then it's gone down from there for a few reasons. One is obviously a head knock, but you can see 33 in 66 minutes and now 34 in 56 minutes. So I do wonder, with players like Corey Horsburgh coming back into the team, Elliot Whitehead coming back into the team, Zach Hosking out this week, but obviously they need to find a home for him as well. There's just so many forward mouths to feed, and I really do wonder how they're going to share these minutes around, and I think it could actually impact all of them, and you may find that as a consequence, all of these forwards end up playing somewhere around the 40-odd minute mark. Let's keep moving. Okay, so Luke Metcalf, unfortunately, he's broken his leg. He's out long term. I don't think we really need to go too much into this one. I think you've got to move on, and you've got to move on quickly. Unfortunately, it's not great for the Warriors, and it looks like Tamari Martin is going to come in and replace Luke Metcalf in the short term. No doubt, if you're a Warriors fan, it's a massive impact to lose Luke Metcalf. He's a superstar player and was traveling really well, so I feel really sorry for the guy. I feel really sorry for the Warriors fans. It's definitely going to have an impact on your team, and hopefully he can recover quickly and get back out on the park. Let's keep moving. Okay, so next up we have Satili Tupanua, and I think it's fair to say that the Tupanua/Wong experiment has just not been a success at all. Tupanua, 416k, 26 break even, and a 0.61 ppm. Owned by just over 18% of fantasy players. The scores just haven't been there. 22, 31, 33, and 32. He's been dropped to the bench this week for Angus Crichton, and I reckon the big concern right now for him is going to be minutes. If he's scoring these type of scores in around 50 to 60 minutes, then I think if that drops down to about 30, then his scores could really drop away, or certainly not exceed where he's currently at. And for me, that's probably the biggest concern, and that's why he makes the sell list. So there you go, guys. Look, we've given you a few guys to consider on the buy, hold, and sell list. If you've liked the video, you know what to do. Smash that like button for me. If you're new to the channel, don't forget to subscribe. And as always, guys, get involved in the conversation via the comment section down below. Let me know if you think I got it right. Let me know if you think I got it wrong. Let me know if you'll be holding or selling any of these guys on the hold sell list. Good luck with your fantasy team this week. And as always, guys, I'll see you all in the next video.